The art of course correcting. Do you beat yourself up for not being perfect? Or do you think over and over again how you could have done something differently? Or maybe you lie awake at night and think about something that happened 10 years ago that still makes you cringe. I'm Jana Henneman, and today we're talking about the art of course correcting. Course correcting is what some people call failing forward, which is fine. Personally, I like to call them learning experiences, but that's just my personal preference. So what is course correction? How can I learn something without beating myself up every time I make a mistake? And what does it take to be nice to myself? Did you know our first trip to the moon, NASA was only 3 to 4% on course? The rest of the time, they were course correcting, tapping that rudder, so to speak. Technically, we were failing 96 to 97% of the time, but we still made it. So how did they do this without considering every mistake they made as a massive failure? This is what we're going to talk about because it's important, because when you're on the road of going to where you want to be, you have to be nice to yourself, or else the journey is not going to be fun. And life's about the journey, right? It's not always about the destination. So number one, quit trying to be important or smart or useful. Oftentimes we put these demands on ourselves, and then when we don't get what we want, we beat ourselves up. So I remember living in Malaysia, and my daughter was between homes. She was between her dad's home and my home. And every time she would come over, usually he would drop her off on a Monday morning, she'd come in and the first thing she'd say was, "Mommy, I want a cookie." And I'd tell her, "Well, that's fine. You can have a cookie after lunch." And she would say, "No, Mommy, I want a cookie now." And I say, "No, we're not going to have a cookie now. We will have one after we eat our lunch." And she would throw a tantrum, as toddlers do, and she would say, "Well, fine, I don't love you. I only love Daddy." And this really perplexed me. Like, here I am trying to be a good mom. I'm trying to be smart, trying to be useful, and I have this little toddler saying that she doesn't love me. So my mentor happened to be giving a talk at the time, and I went into the back of the room. And as you can imagine, I don't want to be seen. I just want to sit down and listen and get the information. And without him knowing that this was something that was bugging me, he pointed at me. He looked right at me and he says, "What makes you so important? Why do you think you deserve all of this from your child?" Now, I was kind of baffled by it because, again, this was something that I had been struggling with for a few weeks that was happening every time my daughter was dropped back off over at my house. And he went on to say, as he just kind of looked right through me, he's like, "It is your job to love. If you receive any love back, it is a bonus. You are supposed to be so filled in loving your child that it fills you naturally. You don't need anything else outside you. It is not her job to love me. It is my job to love her." So he was kind of harsh when he told me this. So I went back, and I think for a couple of days I kind of laid in bed and cried, because I've always been brought up that, hey, you're important, hey, you're smart, hey, you're unique and special. But what this had done throughout my life is it had kind of created this ego about me. Like, hey, I deserve this. I deserve this from you, my child. And he was the one, he could see it. And he said, "No, that's not right." It was funny because when Mia did come back eventually a few days later, the same thing unfolded. "Hi, Mom, I want a cookie." Like, "You can have a cookie, you can have one after lunch." "Well, I want a cookie now." "Well, you're not going to get one now, honey." "Well, that's why I only love Daddy and I don't love you." And so I looked at her and I said, "Well, that's okay. I love you even if you don't love me." It was like something shifted inside me and it no longer hurt me. It shouldn't have hurt me in the beginning. We all know that toddlers do whatever it is they can. They're trying to figure out how to get what they want. But it did. It emotionally bugged me. Anyways, I told her, "You don't have to love me. That's okay. I love you no matter what." And then she looked up at me and these tears kind of swelled in her eyes, and she wrapped her arms around me. She goes, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I love you so much." So it shifted. But I needed to understand that I don't need to be important. I don't need to be useful. I don't need to be smart. I can just be me, right? I can get rid of the ego. Number two, you can respond to a situation or you can react to a situation. You can either respond to life or you can react to it. You can respond to a challenge or you can react to it. Think of it like this, and there's two things in life. There's dharma, which is an upward creative energy, and then there's karma, which is a downward energy. Karma is something like, I could not help being born to John and Carol Marino in San Pedro, California as a female. I didn't really have a say in that. But what I do with my life is that creative energy. It's that dharma. Despite how I was born and what I am working with, I can still create what it is I want to experience in this world. I mean, you can also think of this like a mama bear and a cub. A mama bear doesn't go down to the river and get all the fish that she can so her cub never has to fish and will have enough fish for the rest of his life. No, she takes the baby cub down and she teaches him how to fish for himself. That's the difference between reacting and responding. She's teaching her cub respondability. Reacting would be going and trying to get all the fish that she can because she's afraid her cub won't be able to survive if she doesn't do this. No, she teaches him how to be respond-able in a situation. Number 3, embrace the suck. Abraham Lincoln once said, "The best way to destroy my enemies is to make them my friends." Sure, I can fight them, but if I respond to them and I make them my friends, they are no longer my enemies. So I actually have a really funny story about this with my daughter, and I do not want anyone to take this wrong. She was raised in Malaysia. She was brought up more Buddhist than anything. And when we first moved back to the States, she was watching this anime. And for those of you who don't know, there's a lot of Catholic connotations in Japanese anime. And so she's watching, and she pauses it, and she says, "Mom, how come everyone in here in this movie wants to kill the devil?" And again, she wasn't brought up Christian, she was brought up Buddhist. So I just kind of explained to her, "Well, baby, he was kind of a little bit of a rebel. He did some not so nice things, and now people don't really like him." And she kind of stopped and she goes, "Mom," and she was only 7 at the time, "Mom, if I ever meet the devil, I'm going to make him my friend." And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's so cute. Don't say that out here. We live in the Bible Belt. People are going to think that we're Satanists or something, when that's not the case. In Buddhism, there is more, the dharma, the karma, the yin and the yang. So there's good and the bad, there's bad and the good, everything's neutral. So that's kind of a funny story. And then I remember looking at her and thinking, wow, you're a lot more Christian than a lot of Christians that I know. Thought, oh honey, yeah, that's great. That's awesome, but don't tell people that. So it's a little joke that we have now. So what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing? What are some of the things you're struggling with? Have you considered embracing them? Have you thought about throwing your arms around them and giving them a hug? I know it's easier said than done, but I'm a firm believer that if you sit with a challenge or a problem long enough and you start looking at it neutrally, the answer comes about on its own. Number 4, nothing is a failure. Whenever you're watching a baby learn how to walk, they don't try to walk, fall down once, and then cry and sit in a corner and never try it again. No, they pull themselves back up on the couch. They're drooling. They, have stuff all over them. Maybe they have a crappy diaper, and they just keep going at it again and again. And as parents, we don't look at our child that's learning how to walk, and every time they fall down, we go, "Why aren't you getting it? God, it's the easiest thing in the world. Aren't you some kind of idiot or something?" We don't do that. In fact, when my daughter was learning to walk, her dad and I, every time she fell down, we'd go, "Yay!" and we'd raise our hands so that she learned how to embrace that mistake. And funny, as she grew up, she never beat herself up for making those mistakes. She'd just shrug her shoulders and go, "Okay, I'll do better next time," and then walk off and was mostly emotionally unaffected by it. The point is sometimes we are our own worst enemies. None of us have it all figured out. In summary, course correcting has a lot to do with being able to forgive yourself. It's about embracing your blunders and your mishaps, and embracing the process, the journey, or the suck. I'm Yana Henneman, challenging you to be nicer to yourself, to course correct without beating yourself up, and to embrace the journey. So thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to our social channels, and I will see you this time next week.